Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've changed your mind about the direction of your work, your business, or your projects in the last year? And before you answer, "Oh, but I just adapt to the market," let me ask you another question. How many of those changes actually brought the results you expected? If you're brutally honest with yourself, you'll probably notice a somewhat uncomfortable pattern. Most of us don't change strategy because the scenario demands it. We change because there's something in our brain that simply can't deal with the idea of doing the same thing for a long time without seeing explosive results. Charlie Munger, that gentleman from Omaha who helped Warren Buffett build an empire, spent decades unpacking these patterns. And look, he wasn't one of those motivational gurus who keep repeating catchy phrases. Munger was a lawyer, an investor, and had an almost scientific obsession with understanding why intelligent people make idiotic decisions. He realized something that should be obvious, but that we insist on ignoring. The problem is rarely the lack of information or strategy. The problem is that our brain sabotages us in ways we don't even notice. There's a story Munger used to tell about an investor friend who changed investment strategies 7 times in 10 years. Every time he changed, he had a perfect justification, data that proved the new direction was superior, analyses that showed the mistakes of the previous approach. At the end of the decade, this guy had mediocre returns, while those who had stayed put in a simple index fund had multiplied their wealth. The issue wasn't that his strategies were bad, it was that he never gave time for any of them to actually work. And the worst part? He never noticed the pattern. To this day, he probably still thinks the problem is finding the right strategy. This doesn't just happen with investing. It happens with business, with careers, with content creation, with practically anything that requires time to produce results. And there are 4 specific mental traps that work together to make you believe you're being strategic, when in reality, you're just being impulsive. The first of these traps is something your brain does without you noticing. All recent information seems more important than long-term patterns. Munger called this availability bias, but I'll give you a more concrete example. Imagine you've been running a YouTube channel for 6 months. Steady but slow growth, 10, 15, 20 subscribers per week. You know you're on the right path, but it's frustrating because it's not fast. Then you open Instagram and see 3 different people who exploded on TikTok in a matter of weeks. Videos with millions of views, meteoric growth, everyone commenting. At that moment, something happens in your brain. Those 3 success stories on TikTok suddenly seem to represent the reality of the entire market. The 6 months of consistent work on YouTube seem insignificant compared to these viral explosions. You start thinking, man, clearly TikTok is the future. I'm wasting time on YouTube. But wait a minute. There are millions of people trying to succeed on TikTok. You're only seeing the 3 success cases because they're vivid, recent, and exciting. You're not seeing the tens of thousands who tried and failed because those stories don't appear in your feed. The big trick of this trap is that it hijacks your perception of probability. Your brain wasn't made to process statistics, it was made to react to stories. And stories of quick success are infinitely more attractive than the boring narrative of consistent growth. So you abandon a strategy that was working because you saw some extreme examples of a different strategy working better. It's like giving up on a healthy diet that's making you lose half a kilo per week because you saw 3 people on the internet who lost 10 kilos in a month with a crazy diet. You're comparing your reality with the extreme outliers of another approach, and there's more. The more you consume content on social media, the more vulnerable you become to this trap. Because the algorithm was literally programmed to show you the most extreme cases, the most impressive stories, the most absurd results. It's not going to show you person X maintained a consistent strategy for 3 years and today has solid results. It's going to show you person Y went from 0 to 1 million in 90 days. Your brain has no defense against this unless you consciously recognize the pattern. The second trap is even more treacherous because it disguises itself as rationality. When you want to change, your brain becomes an expert lawyer at building the perfect case to justify the change. Munger was fascinated by confirmation bias, which is this tendency we all have to seek information that confirms what we already believe. But there's a deeper level to this. When you've already emotionally decided you want to change, your brain enters justification mode and starts reorganizing all of reality to make the change seem logical. Let me show you how this works in practice. You've been building a consultancy for 4 months. You have some clients, but it's not that explosion you imagined. Then an opportunity appears to create an info product, or to set up an agency, or whatever, anything that seems new and full of potential. At that moment, observe what your mind starts to do. Suddenly, you only notice the problems with the consultancy. Oh, it's very difficult to scale because it depends on my time. The clients are very demanding. The market is saturated. There's too much competition. Every small obstacle that previously seemed normal now seems like a giant red flag that you're on the wrong path. At the same time, that new opportunity starts to seem perfect. Info product scales infinitely. I can reach many more people. The market is hot. It will give me more freedom. You start finding examples of people who succeeded with this new approach. You read articles, watch videos, talk to people who reinforce this vision. And in the end, you have a beautiful, coherent, and apparently rational presentation of why you need to change direction. The problem is, you're not being objective, you're being selective. You're consciously ignoring all the challenges the new strategy will have, and you're magnifying the challenges of the current strategy. If you applied the same level of critical scrutiny to the new idea that you're applying to what you're already doing, you'd probably see that it also has 1,000 problems. But your brain doesn't want to do that because it's already decided it wants the novelty. All the rational analysis is just a post hoc rationalization of an emotional decision. Munger used to say that one of the biggest differentials of successful investors was the ability to challenge their own conclusions. Before making any significant move, he forced himself to argue against his own idea with the same intensity he would argue in favor. How many times do you do that? When that urge to change strategy hits, do you really sit down and build the case against the change with the same dedication you build the case for it? Or have you already decided and are just looking for confirmation? The third trap is particularly cruel because it wastes exactly the most valuable resource you have: time. You throw away accumulated investment because you don't have patience to wait for the return. There's a famous concept in behavioral economics called the sunk cost fallacy, which is when you keep investing in something bad just because you've already invested a lot. But there's the opposite, which is equally destructive and much less discussed: abandoning something you've already invested in significantly, right at the moment when you're about to reap the fruits. Think about all the skills you've developed, all the contacts you've made, all the systems you've created, all the reputation you've built in your current area. That represents hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of work. But because the results didn't come at the speed you wanted, you simply abandon everything and start from scratch on something else. Now you have to develop new skills, make new contacts, create new systems, build a new reputation. You've gone back to square one, while people who stayed in the same area continued accumulating compound advantages. What makes this especially frustrating is that you often abandon right when you were reaching the inflection point. There's a phase in any venture, any career, any project where you've already done most of the hard work, but the results are not yet proportional. It's that phase where you already have knowledge, you already have some success cases, you already have processes working, but you still don't have the volume you'd like. This is the most dangerous phase because discouragement hits hard. You look back and see all the effort you put in, look at the present and don't see the result you expected. But here's the secret that separates those who build something real from those who are eternally restarting. Right after this phase comes exponential growth. When you already master what you do, when you already have proof cases, when you already have systems running, the tendency is for results to start accelerating. But you'll never reach that phase if you keep restarting the timer every 6 months. It's like planting a fruit tree, watering it for a few months, and when you don't see fruit, pulling it out and planting another in a different place. You'll spend your life planting and never eat a fruit. Munger and Buffett made a fortune with a strategy that seems absurdly simple on paper, but is almost impossible to execute in practice. Buy good companies and hold for decades. Do nothing, literally. While everyone around was buying and selling, reacting to news, adjusting portfolios, they stood still. And they didn't stand still because they were lazy or disconnected. They stood still because they understood that time is a multiplier of results when you have a solid foundation. The fourth trap is the most subtle and perhaps the most powerful of all. There's enormous psychological pressure to do something, anything, even when the best decision is to do nothing. Munger called this tendency to act, or action bias. Standing still, maintaining strategy, being consistent, all of this seems passive, seems like you're not being proactive, seems like you're complacent. So you change, not because the change is necessary, but simply because you need to feel like you're doing something. This is amplified 1,000 times in today's digital world, where everything is so visible and so fast. You see people launching products all the time, changing niches, experimenting with new formats. There's a cultural narrative that you need to always be testing, always innovating, always reinventing yourself. And look, there are contexts where this makes sense. Tactical adjustments are important, testing variations is important, but there's an abysmal difference between optimizing within a strategy and completely changing strategy because you can't deal with the feeling of being stuck. The great poison of this trap is that acting always seems smarter than waiting. If you have a business growing 10% per month, your brain can't accept this as victory. It keeps screaming that it should be growing 50%, 100%, 500%. So you need to do something radical, change the model, pivot completely. But sometimes growing 10% per month consistently for 3 years will take you infinitely further than trying to grow 500% per month and imploding in the process. Consistent growth is boring, but it's real. Explosive growth is exciting, but it's rare and often unsustainable. Munger used to say that most of a successful investor's work should be spent waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for the right price, waiting for results to mature. But waiting doesn't seem like work. If you spend the whole day researching companies but don't buy or sell anything, it seems like an unproductive day. If you spend the week refining existing processes instead of launching something new, it seems like you're not progressing. But often, it's exactly this invisible work of maintenance and patience that separates mediocre results from extraordinary results. Now here's the real problem. These 4 traps don't work in isolation. They combine and reinforce each other in an almost perfect sequence. First, availability bias makes you see a new opportunity and feel it's better than it really is. Second, confirmation bias helps you build an impeccable, rational justification for the change. Third, you ignore all the accumulated investment you're throwing away. Fourth, action bias pushes you to execute the change quickly before reason has a chance to intervene. It's a perfect storm of cognitive self-sabotage. And you know what's most frustrating? You can read this here, agree with every word, and still fall into these traps the next time a shiny opportunity appears. Because intellectual knowledge isn't enough. Munger knew this, which is why he didn't just trust being aware of biases. He built external systems that forced him to be disciplined even when he didn't want to be. Before making any significant strategic move, he and Buffett established objective criteria in writing, and they only changed direction if those fundamental criteria had changed, not if only feelings had changed. Think about how you could apply this. Before starting any strategy, you write, how much time will I give this to work? What specific metrics will I track? Under what objective conditions would it make sense to change? Then, when that uncontrollable urge to pivot hits because you saw something sexy on Instagram, you go back to that document. Have the criteria changed? Have the fundamentals of the market changed? Or has only your mood changed? Another crucial thing, learning to differentiate tactical adjustments from strategic changes. Adjustments you make all the time. Tested a content format and it didn't work? Test another. A traffic source isn't bringing results? Try another. This is normal optimization. It's part of the process. But the central strategy, the fundamental direction that doesn't change every 3 months. It's like navigating a boat. You adjust the rudder constantly to compensate for winds and currents, but the destination port doesn't keep changing all the time. There's also an element of self-knowledge here that's rarely discussed. Some people are genuinely good at rapid changes, at testing multiple things at once, at being multi-potentials. But most of us aren't. Most of us perform better when we have focus, when we can go deep into one thing, when we can develop mastery over time. If you look at your trajectory honestly and realize you're the second type, then you need to build constraints that protect you from your own impulsivity. One of Munger's phrases that most struck me was this: if you take the 3 main investments we made in 50 years and remove them, our performance would be mediocre. Let that marinate for a second. 50 years of career, and the extraordinary results came from 3 decisions. 3. Not from constantly changing strategy, not from trying to catch all opportunities, not from being hyperactive, from making few bets, but well thought out bets, and having the monastic discipline to hold. Of course, entrepreneurial reality is different from stock investing. You need to act more, test more, adapt more, but the central principle still holds. Better to do a few things exceptionally well than to do thousands of things mediocrely. And you'll never do anything exceptionally well if you don't give enough time and energy to really master it. So here's something that can make a real difference in your life. The next time that urgent urge to completely change strategy hits, implement a simple protocol. Stop for 72 hours. It's not forever, it's just to take the adrenaline out of the equation. During those 72 hours, write on physical paper, not on the computer, on paper itself, the answers to these questions. Why exactly do I want to change? How much time and energy have I already invested in the current strategy? What results, even if small, have I already achieved? How much will it cost in time and energy to start from scratch? If I had invested that same energy in optimizing what I already have, where would I be? And then, the most important question of all, is this the first? In time I feel this, or is it a pattern? Because if you look back and realize you've already changed direction 5 times in the last 2 years, then the problem isn't the current strategy. It's something deeper. Maybe you're running from discomfort. Maybe you're addicted to the dopamine of novelty. Maybe you never learned to deal with the boring middle phase, the one where the work is hard and the results haven't exploded yet. Whatever the root, you need to address that before changing anything external. Otherwise, you'll keep repeating the same cycle. And look, I'm not saying you should never change strategy. Sometimes the market really changes. Sometimes you discover you're on the wrong path. Sometimes a genuinely better opportunity appears. But these situations are rare. Most of the strategic changes people make are just emotional reactions disguised as rational decisions. And the cumulative cost of this over the years is devastating. You find yourself looking at people who started at the same time as you and wondering how they got so far. The answer usually isn't that they had a magical strategy. It's simply that they stayed long enough in the same direction for the compound interest of effort to take effect. Charlie Munger lived to 99 years old and spent most of that time studying human errors. And in the end, his conclusion was both simple and profoundly difficult to apply. Most people sabotage their own results not by making the wrong choices, but by not having patience to let the right choices mature. So maybe the biggest productivity hack, the biggest competitive differential, isn't finding the perfect strategy, but rather developing the ability to keep doing the same thing well for long enough for the magic of compound time to take you where you want to go. And if you can do that, you'll look back in a few years and realize that it wasn't some moment of genius that changed everything. It was simply not having given up in the 1,000 moments when it seemed to make sense to give up.